The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process.
There can be many possibilities. I do try to keep recording and doing improvisations and try to learn my gear. Mm-hmm. I think that the practice itself, first off, the recordings frequently make it as stuff that I select from in order to have recordings for a release. Mm-hmm. When it's more improvisational, like Raw 1 is a release that I did on Component Recordings that's all improvisational modular work.
Great.
I can also be inspired by current events and things that are messed up, which there's plenty of inspiration from
that,
nowadays.
Yeah,
yep. Yeah.
Well, and so in a way, just by turning some knobs and started messing around with the technology, that in a way kind of the inspiration is the doing, sort of in a way.
It is, and also my normal process for the improvs is I have to listen to everything. Now, if you have to listen to everything you do, you're going to get better at it just so you can save yourself the frustration of listening to things that you're not happy with. Right. That alone will motivate you.
You know, and it's weird. Some people say to me like, oh, I don't like to listen back to what I did, or, you know, once the album's out, I don't want to listen to it. And
then keep going until you do. That's my advice.
Yeah, because I think there's so much learning that happens from that too, right?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, you have different ears when you're listening versus when you're improvising.
Right.
There's something very different about the listening experience versus the creative experience when you're in the moment.
You know, one thing I've noticed is when I have to be sitting there creating something, the way I experience time is it goes by very quickly because I'm so locked in. But as a listener, do you find yourself kind of being like for me at least, as a listener, I'm like, this isn't moving fast enough, or the pacing. Do you find yourself doing that, or?
That can be the case, but I'm also like a fan of the orb. So there are things that require patience that are worth experiencing. Yeah. And then there are times where it's just like, yeah, this is dragging. You know?
Right. Yeah, and there's such a fine line between that when it's like, oh, this is slowly developing, it feels organic, and this is too long. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, because said a fan of Brian Eno, same
Right.
idea.
Well, yeah, and discrete music that's just like 32 minutes of kind of waiting. I feel like that.
Yep. Fripp and Eno's Index of Metals.
Yeah.
I've had many interns sit down, not
Yeah.
watch the clock, and listen to that track, and then question them about how long they think went by.
Right.
And they're like 5 to 10 minutes, and it's like almost a 30-minute piece.
Right. Right. Yeah. And
Anyway.
that's the really cool thing. No, the dilation of music, right? Where, whether you're performing it or listening, it can really kind of mess with your sort of center. So that's your general process then, really is, right? Is like sit down with the technology, start turning the knobs with the instruments, and sort of make some stuff and then listen back to it.
That's the general process for a lot of my pieces, but at the same time, I mean, my roots are like golden age hip hop. So
Sure.
doing lyrical content and maybe having a groove that you're doing it to for the pacing, and then building the music around that is also something I do occasionally. The song we're going to cover is kind of in that territory.
Right. So do you ever find, so you have this practice time you're talking about, and this practice time could be performing, but let's say, okay, so we were talking about modules before we started here. Sometimes there's, a little bit of work involved in installing the modules, wiring the modules, getting them to interact with one another. So do you consider that part of the practicing time, or is that a whole other category?
That's another thing, the building of instruments and building of patches. And I mean, building of sounds, that part is quick because of modular. Like that part, it's just like, I mean, I can go into the Erica Synths Perkins HD1 and tweak out sounds very rapidly from what I want to try doing.
Sure.
Same thing goes with the Eurorack. So whereas like old stuff that I was doing on like Ableton Live and Fruity Loops before that, there'd be a lot of time spent just creating those sounds and developing them to sound like what I wanted.
And with these kind of modules, then you have sort of the kind of base level tones that you want, and then you can start shaping them.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I often hear people say maybe the opposite is that the complexity of the hardware sometimes, staggers them a bit, but you're kind of the opposite of that, the sort of specificity of a module, like it was designed to make this tone or this sound.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it's just like, okay, like different drum synths that I'm using, they have a range of what they can do. Some of them are very wide range. Some of them, it's just like, this is designed to make a snare sound. How you tweak that, there's plenty of possibilities, but it's a snare. So, yeah.
And that baseline snare is a specific sound that, it's like kind of ready to go. It's like a lot of the younger producers these days are using, like these splice libraries or these like sample libraries to have sort of this baseline thing that they can start to manipulate.
I'm a little lazy for sampling nowadays because I can do so much with synthesis.
Sure.
But I think you're missing out on so much fun if you're not making your own sample library and recording your own sounds. That's just coming from industrial music being a root.
Right. Yeah. And the rich history of taking, industrial sounds, taking environmental sounds, just ambient noise, and using the hardware to sort of shape it and craft it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some hardware that's easier than others to use for that, like an SP404. It's just like hook up a mic to that, throw some batteries, and then have fun in the environment, and you'll have a drum kit.
Right. Well, so it never becomes an issue then for you, right? Like that there's too much hardware, there's too much technology. You never feel like, do you ever have to like limit, you're saying like, okay, I'm only using this rack today, or do you have to, because you've got quite an arsenal. So
the too much hardware problem comes up when it comes to live shows.
Right.
And loading everything in my car. Cause I mean,
like
I also use scrap metal and like 55-gallon drums, and sometimes have to load a PA.
Yes. And
video gear.
Yeah, I've seen your live setups, and it's almost like sometimes it's like 360 degrees of equipment around you, which is awesome.
No, that's too much of a pain in the ass. I don't want to have to get under the table to get in. So there's always a hole somewhere that I can enter.
So it's not a true 360 degrees, maybe like 270. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So when you're okay, so you talk about this like patching, creating, getting the sounds together, practicing, rehearsing, listening back. You're mentioning sort of cherry picking then, or taking, hey, I like this. So let's say you jam for 20 minutes and you're like, this 2-minute section I really like. Do you go back then and sort of practice that 2 minutes or expand that, or?
I can, but usually it's like when I'm doing the improvs, first off, I'm like probably going from anywhere from 2 minutes to like 20-minute max.
Okay.
Like it's something that's listenable. I don't tend to drag on that long with one thing for like too often. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably try something completely different the next track that I do, where I change the tempo, change the sounds, etc., to try to keep challenging myself to try to come up with some new ideas. There's a lot of repeated patterns that I use, but I try to change things up where I can, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I like that idea. Like I was talking to Bob and Glenn, and they were talking about with their recent album, they were doing like 2-hour-long jam sessions and then kind of listening back to them and kind of picking the parts they liked.
That seems to make sense given the way that they operate. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're saying you're doing kind of shorter, kind of more, because you want to listen to it. You want to sit back and listen to it.
Part of what I'm practicing is the song flow of everything and how where it comes in for an ending and how to end it, and things like that are some of my considerations while I'm doing it. That's part of just the way I do that. Yeah.
So you're kind of creating the form by actually doing it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So you get a great 2 minutes, you get a great 7 minutes, you get a great 5 minutes. You work it, maybe you do some re-recording or some adjustments, some mixing. How do you know when it's done then?
I mean, when I'm doing improvs, I don't consider it done until I've given it at least 24 hours and listened with fresh ears.
There's a cooling off period.
I want a different perspective than when I was creating it, because honestly, there are times where I felt like it worked, and when I listen back, I'm like, nah, I can do better. And then there are times when I'm like, that didn't feel right, and then I listen back and I'm like, what was I talking about? This is great. So the perspective is important.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the time dilation too that we were talking about, where afterwards then you're just like, oh, well, that was a disaster. And then the next day you listen to it and you're like, oh, actually, like I was onto something here.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it might be that I was in a messed up mood or mental health wasn't so good that day.
Sure.
And the results are better than I thought they were.
Yeah.
Maybe even because of that.
Yeah, and kind of being our own worst critics, right? Like, oh, that's just...
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. I got the chance to listen to Radiator Love from Quantum Sleeper, which is under your moniker Deftly Demolition. The album is Quantum Sleeper, and that's on Void Star Productions. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's also a physical release on Love Earth Music, run by Steve Davis of Plus DOG Plus.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how this one all came together. Was it through experimentation and then the lyrics came afterwards, or did it start with the lyrics?
It's a combination of coming from different approaches to the same goal.
Yeah.
The opening of it is one of several tracks that came from improvisations with modular. And in that case, where you hear like this wavering drum beat coming in.
Yeah.
Sort of in the vein of like Stockhausen's Contacte, where he has like a piece of music concrete. But in this case, it's using maths where one of the LFOs is controlling the speed of another LFO, and that LFO's end of cycle is triggering a kick drum, turning into the synth voice.
Yeah.
And that's like just the opening part of it. The lyrics, on the other hand, came from recovery from a mental breakdown that happened from narcissistic abuse. And while trying to research and learn as part of the healing process, one of the things I came across was a story of Dr. Harlow and his experiments with howler monkeys, trying to understand attachment theory. But he was very cold and cruel in the way that he did a lot of this. So
it was like pre-IRB type.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's pretty sad looking at what he did, but what he did also has parallels in narcissistic abuse. So yeah.
So yeah, and listening to the lyrics, it's actually interesting. I took this idea of, could this be from the perspective of a cat? I had this like idea, like, is this from a perspective of some type of animal that's kind of all its needs are met, but at the same time they're kind of unsatisfied?
Yep. It's literally from the perspective of a howler monkey, a baby howler monkey in one of Harlow's experiments, where they're basically in captivity, treated in cold conditions, and where they have these sculptures of mothers, one of them being covered with carpet and being where they get their comfort from and be able to cuddle up. And the other one being this steel sculpture that just looks like a modern art thing, and where they put the food.
And so apparently there must have been some psychological like experiment that they were trying to do here that may seem very abstract or cruel to us now, but
oh no, it absolutely was.
Yes.
They were basically talking about attachment, the need for attachment in children to their mothers.
Right.
Or to parents, or to some sort of touch and comfort from another, and love from another being. So they were experimenting with taking that away from these little monkeys. So
right. Which is like we were saying with IRB, like that in itself bring no harm to the participants. That that in itself is pretty atrocious. But I think it that gives me some more kind of guidance to what was going on musically then too, because one of the things I felt about the track, I felt like the lyrics and sort of the chorus like material was very sort of sing-songy and kind of lullaby-ish.
Oh, absolutely. And intentionally so. You definitely nailed something about the vibe that I was going for. Right.
But yet the, something's not quite right. And it's a very industrial track, right? So we feel the machine and the kind of the entropy of a lot of industrial music, and kind of this track, it's sort of, as it's moving through, it starts to kind of break down and sort of, become less focused on the lyrics.
Yeah, and there was a track that I did a cover of from Severed Heads before doing this that I think leaked in a little bit as far as its inspiration.
Always inspired, yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes it's inspiration, sometimes it's highway robbery, but either way.
I think I can accept inspiration at this point.
Inspiration, legally, we.
Yep.
But no, that's one thing I noticed, that I think when those lyrics came in, they were sing-songy, they sounded like a lullaby, but were not very comforting. And as the track evolves, I noticed one of the things that you were doing is that there's this really beautiful use of noise, and not just noise as in, distortion or harmonic distortion, but actually sort of ambient, sort of room tone that you're sort of shaping and crafting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There were definitely layers of more improvisational experiments with the modular that I mixed in as I was developing the track. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those layers of noise include things where I'm doing vocals and looping and then running filters through that, and all sorts of modulation to create this warped kind of feel to it.
And was that your intention for the track, to kind of keep devolving and kind of sort of becoming more like the harmony? I even noticed the bass started to come out of it. So the foundational harmony for that, the lyrics kind of sort of drifted away as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's important for the things that are improvised to be able to take the foreground for a period of time. Sure. And like bridges are a great place for that. Yes. Doing things because they're the next thing due? Yes. Doing things because they are due, that's where I have panic.
Right. Right. They're the next thing to do, and also they are due. So that, yeah.
And here's the thing. Panic makes us go into lizard brain, where we're not thinking with higher cognitive functions. So it's actually harder for us to solve complex problems like that.
Yeah.
So I try to avoid the situations that have panic and put out the fires before they start.
Yeah.
As a strategy.
And it's never,
It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy.
No. For me, working on drone and ambient music, it makes me sit there for a little while. It makes me sit there and listen. And a lot of times that's exactly what I need to do, is to stop moving and just kind of sit and listen.
I think there's a value to saying this time is allotted for this thing that I'm going to focus on.
Yep.
And I think there's a guilt from some things that people have been through where they're like, whatever I'm doing is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And to remove it, have that time allotted where it's like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm listening. This is all I'm doing. And
I'm listening.
It's just like that helps greatly with a lot of the mental ills from just people guilt tripping and stuff like that from childhood for a lot of people.
Yeah. And our own being like, well, can I just be doing this one thing right now? Like I should be doing 5 other things right now, because I can be multitasking,
Yep, and you can't do 5 things at once unless you're a really excellent juggling act.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can do one thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And focus on it. Yeah.
And when it's done, do another thing and you'll get those 5 things done in the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, this has been awesome. It's really great to hear about your music, and then also sort of your perspective on the sort of healthy habit of being creative, and just about collaborating in a community that's positive.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, though, please let us know all the kind of crazy things you have coming up, whether it's with Void Star Productions or performances or otherwise.
All right. Well, I have in front of me a few shows that are going on. Friday, July 18th, Dance or Don't is presenting an untitled event. I will be performing solo as Deftly Demolition, along with So Gutter, Hex Head, Toto Robin, Compactor, Barbie AI, and much more. That is at a place called the Rabbit Hole. You'll have to contact for info about that. Saturday, July 26th at Synth Cube in Waltham, Mass. I'm hosting a release party for Metal Tiger's Scientific and Noise Code's Interplay, both of which released on Void Star Productions. Metal Tiger, Noise Code, Alien Touring, and Fungus will be performing live. Saturday, August 23rd is the next Void Star Productions Salon Party. These are parties for musicians to perform for and with each other with a small audience. We never know who's going to play until they show up. Again, that's Saturday, August 23rd. You'll have to get in touch if you're interested in going. August 22nd to 25th is a thing called Virtual Temple 9 that's going to be streaming live performances from Phantasmagorical Cannibal Animal, Deftly Demolition, my friends in Alien Touring and Noise Code, and quite a few others. So do check that out. Sunday, October 5th in Somerville, Mass, The Jungle is going to be presenting Phantasmagorical Cannibal Animal. And beyond that, check out the releases I have on Void Star Productions, including Solidarity, which is a 5.5-hour compilation that I produced that has so far raised $1,700 for the American Civil Liberties Union, and who is doing an effective job of combating Trump and his minions. So do check that out.
Fantastic. Thanks to David for sharing his time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series, and as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.